Brock Purdy made history today, became the first NFL quarterback to win his first 6 career regular season starts and throw for at least 2 touchdowns in each of those starts. I just got a text while we're sitting here, John, from a former NFL quarterback, and he said, Brock Purdy is such a stud. And I said, tell me what you love about him. And he said, he never gets overwhelmed, which most guys that have very little experience like him can't do consistently.
It's crazy. You wouldn't think John Elway would like that type quarterback, given that he was big, fast, and strong.
Yeah.
I mean, for him to be a believer in Brock Purdy, what he's telling you right there.
Took me a second. Don't out Elway. Not far off, though, John, actually. Not far off.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, he's good. I text with a buddy who's down on him. Now, this buddy has, I would say, an agenda, given the team he's on. Thinks he's a little overhyped. He thinks it's closer to Pickett. He's like, if you flip-flopped him, the scheme. And it's like, listen, I know you watch him in one-off situations. I don't think he's a scheme-oriented guy. He benefits from having good players around him, right? But he makes plays. I guess my ultimate point is no one's anointing him as like a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. But relative to the Shanahan run, they won a ton of games with Jimmy, who clearly, relative to the rest of his peers, probably 15, 16, 17 range, right? That's where Jimmy sits.
Yeah.
This guy is better. Now, I'm not saying he's got to do it longer to be better than, to just be considered better than Carr, Cousins. I think most people in a weird way would think Jimmy's better than Carr. That one's a complicated one. Dak. But, I just watch Brock Purdy and go, I think he makes a lot of plays outside the construct of the offense.
He does. I mean, I think his feel at times, Jimmy felt like he had good feel for the game, Garoppolo, but Brock more consistently has good feel for what's happening, I think.
Did you see the pick Jimmy threw today?
I don't think I did.
He threw a baby zone pick. Classic, in the pocket, nothing's there, does his scramble. Purdy does the same thing. Pocket, nothing there, I'm a scramble. And he scrambles into just kind of open area. So it's just like, he's just kind of sitting here cooking. He's doing some of these. They both do it. When Purdy lets the ball go, I don't want to say 100% confident. I'm not acting like he's Peyton Manning or Tom Brady releasing the football. I feel pretty confident at this point. When Jimmy threw it, I'm all, here we go. Into coverage, ball straight up in the air, lands in a DB's, breadbasket, he hits the ground, turnover. Almost cost them the game. Obviously, it didn't because they won, but it was a classic. And I think everything has to be compared to Jimmy because they won so many games with Jimmy.
Right.
And this guy is much better. So they have to have a better chance. They were a Super Bowl contender with Jimmy Garoppolo. This guy's better, clearly. Eye test, stat-wise, it's not even debatable. How are they not just a better team, right? If most of the other stuff around him is the same.
How about the play where he rolled left? Well, not rolled left, scrambled left, stops, turns, flips his hips, and you're like, it does happen with Brock still where I'm like, I don't know if he can trigger this ball fast enough given where the defender is. He stops, flips, triggers, and Debo is like diving back the other way to make the catch right before Purdy got hit on a 2nd and 8, and it was a first down. It was a really, really impressive play. And he's more athletic than Jimmy. Debo made several. NIU consistently does. Ayuk also gets wide ass open a lot for a guy who's, obviously very good, but that's part of it. But I thought
he gets clearly treated like the number 2, and Brock and Kyle know it. You right?
Yeah, almost like 2.5 because I think McCaffrey, is part of that. They've got a really complicated thing to try and stop, and we talk so much about what the Niners gave up for Trey. We never really talk about the value that McCaffrey has given them, given what they traded for him. If you knew he would be this, you would have had to. You already knew he was special. If you had known he'd been this, you would have traded more for him. You would have happily traded more for McCaffrey.
Well, I think his value around the league would have gone up a lot, right? Because I think most people's initial reaction with a running back is just this is what made him very. And this is where a lot of people argue about scheme specific, right? The 49ers are just McCaffrey wouldn't be as good on the Chiefs, right? They just would not, like a lot of his big plays, he's obviously good in the passing game, do happen in the run game. I mean, his run today where he does the little 360 broken tackle to the house, Ayuk's, Andy just doesn't run it consistently. And they are, I mean, once the dust settles, Chiefs will be fine. But my point is, his best attribute, and I underrated this coming out, he's an unreal running back. Like an
between the tackles.
Between the tackle power back. And that's, I remember you always said this because David Shaw hammered this till no one would listen. You guys are underselling him how good of a true running back he is.
Yeah.
And he is like the way we talk about the Adrian Petersons and the Derrick Henry. So that immediately makes a quarterback's life a little easier, right? But I'd go back to like the Jimmy 19 team. That team had more of a group of guys, but they were an unreal running team. When your running game is good, it makes it easier on you. But Brock does make, I mean, the pass he made on Patrick Peterson to Ayuk in the corner, what's the worst case scenario that happened? Probably gets broken up. Like, that's a good miss, you know?
Did you see what he said after the game?
I did, yeah. He wasn't going to. He's not gonna.
Brock was just like, was that on Peterson? Everyone's like, yeah. And he just smiled. I thought that was the right way to handle it. And then he said, I also think
Brock grew up in Arizona when Peterson was sweet. You know, it's not like, I bet he doesn't even not like the guy.
No, I think he's got a ton of respect for him. I think it's part of what makes Brock attractive as a player is that he doesn't shy away from that. It doesn't intimidate him, and he actually is happy to try and beat Patrick Peterson. Like, that's the fun of playing at the highest level and being in the big leagues, is you hit against other big leaguers, and can I get a hit against this guy? Patrick Peterson made a couple of really good plays early in the game. I wonder if he thought he was going to pick off one of those Kittle throws, I think.
I think he thought exactly the middle of the field, those digging ins that, you know, all the 49ers and all the people that have played in this offense, like, they live for that play over the middle. And so I bet Patrick Peterson's like, that's what I was going to get.
Yeah.
He's not an outside corner anymore at the highest level because he's not that fast. I do, like, the one thing that's going to happen, he will have games like this, which he has not in his career. He will throw some pick sixes and picks, right? He gets close. And I give him credit, and I think this is why they like him, is when Jimmy would let it go, it was like, bro, that's not even close. Well, I mean, what the fuck are you doing? Any coach, I think, can live with a 50-50 ball if it's thrown to a guy like, we're paying Debo $60 million. I mean, George Kittle's a guy that when you do restructures, we plan on having a guy on the team for a decade, right? He's going to go down as one of the great Niners of this era. Even Ayuk now has established himself. Like, you throw the ball up. But he does put some balls in places when he's scrambling around that, I mean, he could have thrown the pick to Peterson. Again, I'm good with that. Like, I don't need – one of the things Aaron Rodgers hangs his hat on has the lowest interception percentage in the league history. It's like, that's never going to be Purdy's. I know technically it might be, but it won't be over a period of time, and that's fine as long as you're getting 3 and 4 touchdowns. Remember we said when they were going to transition to Trey Lance, it was like, listen – Jimmy just hovered around like 1.5 touchdowns a game, it felt like. If you can get to like averaging around 3, I can live with a 12 picks. But clearly that was never going to happen. If Purdy's going to be on a 30 to 35 touchdown level play, you can live with 9 picks. Because you're going to win so many games. You're so much better than so many teams. You could probably close your eyes to 10 wins, and then those other, it might be the difference between like 12 and 14 or whatever, but those are first-class problems.
Yeah, because he's going to make the basic plays, and he does make plus plays, which I think is the biggest question with Brock over time. Will he keep making all these plus plays? You make plus plays, you know. It's like Asante Samuel's thing, right? Is like, man, he got a lot of interceptions, but you could get him to bite, and you'd beat him deep. But he was one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL. Giveth and taketh. I mean, they threw the ball on a 4th and 1 early in the game. Now, it was a simple throw, but I think even Kyle made the point after the game, George got kind of bumped off, and luckily it was a really good throw from Brock, so George could catch it and just turn upfield.
It wasn't a seamless layup.
No. But they made it look that way.
Yeah. Well, and this is why everything that happened over the last 12 months
Here
really
we go.
Separated.
Here we go.
This is why, right? That pass, accuracy. I was had a sober Saturday night. I was like, I'm going to really take in today. Get up early, go to the gym, had Fox on, and I could hear it. One thing, Jimmy Johnson, because all of a sudden I look over and I see a picture of Trey Lance in a Cowboys uniform, and the 5 of them. Gronk's in the middle. You got Terry screaming. You got Howie and Menifee and Michael Strahan, and then Jimmy's like, accuracy, guys, accuracy. I don't care if it's 1970s or 2023 with the rules. You have to be an accurate quarterback. And clearly this guy has on the basic stuff. He obviously brings more to the table, right? The basic stuff, he's really accurate on the touch. Like, those are plays that if you just watched it really quick, you'd be like, oh, this is a basic. It's clearly not an easy NFL play because the timing's a little off. You kind of got to back up, and then you got to hit him in stride. There were a couple plays today you see with Fields, with Love, with some of these random quarterbacks. Mack had his moments early in the game. Now, granted, it was raining. Like, the difference between hitting a guy in stride and not hitting a guy in stride is the difference of first downs, touchdowns, punts. I mean,
how about the Kenny Pickett, John? The throw over the middle, it would have been a touchdown. He throws it behind Deontay Johnson, right?
He was, I mean, the Steelers better hope that was just a real off game, because I thought even sometimes when he's had throws to be there, he was just like, what the fuck was that?
Yeah.
Could not be a positive experience right now if you're a Steeler fan. Like, what? Or you could just have to chalk it up. Is that the best defense we're going to play all year?
Yeah, it might be. I mean, the same, like, if you were going to nitpick a couple things, we can get to a couple of nitpicks. Well, I'll get to that in a second. I do want to say this, not to bring up Trey again, but because I said this earlier, someone's like, why are you talking about Trey? This is not a Trey point. But the people who told you that Trey should have been competing with Brock Purdy through training camp, this is why GFF existed. Because I thought, I don't think that's true, but let's evaluate things. And like you always said, there is no competition. He's the starting quarterback for good reason. But they lied. They were lying to you. They lied to you. You can say, I think Trey's better. You can have the opinion that I disagree with. That's fine. But he earned what he did because of that, because he looks like that in games. That's what he has looked like in games so far.
Well, and this gets back to, it's hard in the offseason because there's such a wide gap. And every month that goes by, right, March, May, April, June, as we get through the summer, since the last time you saw people in pads, like playing actual football, even if you go as far as the Niners do. And this is why there are a lot of draft mistakes, because you just get in your own head because you don't have anything to go off of. It's so easy once you see a game to just have a take. You're like, Packers actually might not be terrible. Patriots pretty good defense. Like you just see it. You just get one game, you just see some act. The preseason games mean such, like, the equity they hold in the decision makers in terms of, there's a difference of, like, God, I think this guy could contribute on special teams. Right? I mean, those are the conferences. Not, yeah, I think this guy easily could be our starting quarterback. I got a text today. Did you see the play? Jimmy got, like, thrown to the ground and hit, and it was classic, like, you got to go make sure he doesn't have a concussion. It was one of those plays because he got up slow a little bit. Clearly Jimmy's pissed, like, I'm fine. Classic yank. Again, new rule, yank. I wasn't really paying attention, and I just got a text. Wait, Hoyer's their backup quarterback? Brian Hoyer came into the game, not Aiden O'Connell. And I was like, well, it's a little bit like Purdy last year. Coaches, I don't care if you're Andy, Belichick, or Pete, or the younger versions, you don't, like, lean 22-year-old 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th rounder, right? Now, if Aiden O'Connell, if a bunch of injuries happen, and then he goes 8 games, and they go 6-2, that completely changes everything forever moving forward in their minds. And I think this was a great example. The preseason didn't mean anything. It meant nothing. I've always believed this to my core. The Sam Darnold addition, who got some snaps, you see, like, Purdy's like, oh, Sam! When they kneeled it.
How many of the comments said earlier, why did Darnold get the victory formation?
Because they love their quarterback room. As long as Sam just knew the calls in the huddle, it was based on his experience. Everyone's like, oh, it sucked. Not everyone. I mean, the internet, which relative to his stats in football were not a positive. Kyle viewed that as experience. He knows what to do. I'll get him to do the right things.
Yeah, right.
I can see it coming from a mile away.
And the evidence, and McCaffrey's an example of this too. Like, the evidence so far is pretty overwhelming. Offensive players are better when they play for him. He gets their best.
If Kyle doesn't think you're any good, you probably stink. I don't even see how that, like, what's the other side of the argument? Kyle's
that he's wrong, right? Like, okay, maybe he thought Dante Pettis, it felt like, was useless, and Dante's proved to be an NFL player, right?
I just thought he couldn't play for them. Yeah, he went on to play for other teams, but I mean, there's a difference of, like, you're not good enough to play for us.
Right.
We drafted you too high.
We have a lot of good receivers. Yeah.
If that's your best argument, I'm not saying you are those people, but, like,
I'm just playing devil's advocate here.
Yeah, I don't think there's an argument. We can nitpick, like, I don't love that play. Like, do we really need to run McCaffrey? You could nitpick probably Belichick over those 20 years, right? Him and Brady. Like, what are we doing here? Do we need to do this? Bill, do you really need to cut this guy to make a point, right? You can do that with Kyle. But ultimately, his resume is fucking really good at this point. Now it feels like he's really rolling, right? Now it feels like, overdrive, motherfuckers.
Well, as you know, once you get the more experience you have with something, the more comfortable you are to kind of be more creative, and the less you operate out of like fear, what happens if I fail. Kyle is, I said this to you earlier, like a few months ago, but because I looked at a few months ago, only Andy Reid and Josh McDaniels have coordinated offenses for more consecutive NFL seasons than Kyle Shanahan. He has been in the league, no days off, no suspensions, Sean Payton, for more consecutive years than everybody except two other guys. And it's Andy Reid and Josh McDaniels, weirdly enough. I didn't expect that when I did the research. But, I mean, it's almost 20 years he's been coordinating offenses consecutively.
20?
No, it's not 20. It's almost 20. It's like you got to go back to, we go way back, but it's a long time that he's been doing it. Maybe it's, I could look up the number.
14 or whatever.
Yeah, 15, something like that. It's long. Let me just put a bow on this because Eddie says people that I'm talking about with the Trey Lance point, Grant Cohn clown emoji. I'm not talking about Grant, actually. There are several people who attended Niner practices that I disagreed with, that I said I thought Darnold was better than Trey. I remember I did that stream the day that Darnold was named the backup with Larry Krueger and John Dickinson, and they both thought that Trey and Darnold had been equal. I did not. So Grant has repeatedly just partly, I think, reported the fact, like he'd be like another interception from Brock, another.
No, I like Grant. He's very opinionated. He thought.
No,
Brock
I know, but
sucked,
I'm just saying, like, I had no problem with that type of stuff. My comment is more for the people who said, like, the media and the Niners are suppressing competition. The media doesn't want to tell you how good Trey has looked. Like, that kind of shit was BS. It was not true. It wasn't true. When it came to the competition you want to talk about competition with Sam, we can disagree about what that competition was like. But when it came to Brock, there was never a point where there should have been anything other than what it was, which was he's the starting quarterback.
I think I'll give my final opinion on this
for today
because it hit me today. The discourse on quarterbacks with 49ers on the internet, which bled over to talking about it because a lot of people I talk to, you talk to in real life, look at the internet and see the conversations. Ultimately, I thought was pretty embarrassing, a clown show, and I think was proven to be a complete waste of time. And I'm guilty to get caught in the middle of it. Not that my days of arguing back and forth with people, but listen, the information's the information we have now. I wonder if those people just pretend like they didn't say anything and just move on, and just like August didn't happen. I'd say I'd keep receipts, but then I'd have to care about what those individuals think. I think it also shows you how little people understand, know. Clearly, a lot of people had an agenda, don't exactly know why, besides just they traded a lot. Who actually cares? The team was good. I completely understand it if the team sucked. Like, I would have had that. Like, why don't you just see what the kid's got? Who cares? He's not any good. And they moved on. They got very, very lucky that they could unload a guy who's not very good and who makes a lot of money and just completely move on and keep it fucking rolling. And that's a testament to the way they built this team for a fourth-round pick. I thought it would. I would have traded him for a seventh as long as you take the money, as long as I didn't have to eat anything if I was the 49ers. And I think ultimately they were probably prepared to. They were getting rid of this guy. And I did you send me a text being sarcastic? I think they had mentally moved on. Kyle says 10 days. If if a coach is publicly saying that, you could probably add 15. So I mean, they had moved on. I think for a while, guy. And again, it had been well reported by other reporters that this guy was on the table, right? But
Mike Silver said it.
They weren't going to give him away.
A lot of people were comfortable saying it publicly.
Like the Vikings, right? Wanted to trade for him during the draft. Well, they probably wanted to trade a 6th-round pick, which ultimately the 49ers made the right decision. It's like, it's not worth it quite yet. Maybe he looks kind of good. But the preseason, I think it shows you, and we learn this every year, how irrelevant the preseason is. Hell, I kind of got on the Steelers bandwagon because they were awesome in the preseason. Now, they played a bad game, but also 49ers is better than them. right? I mean, the 49ers won 4 playoff games the last 2 years. Steelers haven't been to the playoffs. They didn't go last year, and they haven't won a playoff game in 7. So it's like they're just a different level. And a big part of that different level is their quarterback. Think about that. Kenny Pickett was drafted number 20. Bad quarterback draft, but still 20 last year, right? 20 overall. The other dude was drafted, 255 or whatever the exact number is. And yeah, he's just better.
Somebody said, "Oh, I see. We're going to get 2 minutes of Lance on every show." If he plays, if you're listening to this Monday and he led the Cowboys to a win over the Giants, then I guess we could go emergency pod on that.